long to get through that. Sorry about that. All right, so we are moving on to Chapter 4. Chapter 4, we're going to talk about income taxes. We've covered Social Security and Medicare taxes and how to calculate that. This chapter covers the calculation for withholding of income taxes. It does not cover anything about the calculation of, like, a calculation of personal income taxes on the tax form that's due in April. We don't deal with that, but that income tax withholding relates to the tax return that is then submitted in April, because all of the tax withholding acts as a prepayment for those taxes that are due for the entire year. So when you're preparing your Form 1040, again, it's basically a reconciliation type form that you're preparing. When you're preparing that, you are calculating how much tax you owe, and then you're subtracting how much you've already paid. And then that's how much you have left to pay, or if you had too much withholding over the course of the year, then that's when you get a refund. So all of this income tax withholding does relate to the Form 1040, which is filed by individuals at tax time, but this class doesn't cover the preparation of that form. When you take income tax accounting, that's when we will cover that, and we'll see again then how all of this income tax withholding that is set aside by the employers, how that relates then to and is used on the Form 1040, the income tax form. So I'm going to show you. I don't have quite as many resources in here. If you want, so I'm going to post this video so you can watch it again. And I'm going to have I'll have a separate folder for the 2023 lecture videos. If you want to work ahead at all over spring break, you are welcome to go in here. And these were recorded last fall. So they're the same, even though the tables that are used are going to be slightly different. They get adjusted every year for inflation. The concepts are all the same. So if you wanted to kind of work ahead a little bit, you're welcome to watch these videos. This, like I said, this is all the concepts that were covered in these lectures last fall are the same ones that we're going to cover this semester. It's just that these this just lets you work ahead a little bit if you want. But like I said, so when I do calculations in these videos, if you were to do the same calculation for tax year 2022, the result would be different, because the tables, and I'll show you the tables that I'm talking about, the tables change because tax rates change, brackets change, all sorts of things are adjusted for inflation. So like I said, and this was based on 2021, even though this was recorded in 2022, based on 2021 tax tables and stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. If you wanted to look at it in order to get ahead, give you a little preview of what we're going to be talking about, feel free. If you don't worry about it. But also, if you decide to do homework, these may help you out. In fact, there's a homework review video. All right. So one of the things, though, that I want to point out, other than the videos, the lecture videos, which I'm actually going to move up here, I like it better at the top, are these tables. So these are the things that these are the items that I said when I just said the tables have changed from last year. These are the tables from this year. So these are the tables that you want to use for your homework. Now, Iowa, we're really not going to use any for the homework, but I will, not today, but I will go through how Iowa calculates withholding. Now, again, this is based on 2022, not 2023. And as I mentioned, Iowa is in the midst of some big income tax changes. So again, if you were to calculate like your own withholding using these tables, it would not be accurate because the tables you need to use are for 2023. But for homework purposes, these are the tables that you need to use. I recommend that you download this table. You are going to use this a lot, okay? This is going to come in very handy to you. So if you could have it, you know, it would be easier for you to download it and have it accessible to you than like using whatever link there is in the book. I mean, it should be the same information in the book as it is here, but I just think that this is a little more accessible. First off, you've got the jump twos here. This is a long publication. This is, how many pages we got here? 68 pages. This is an IRS publication. These are issued every year, and you can see right on it, it tells you what tax year it is for. That would mean that any paycheck issued in 2022 would use the information in this pamphlet in order to calculate federal income tax withholding. Okay, so you'll see, I can look up the 2023 one. 3 pub, there we go, 15T. Don't use this, I'm just showing it to you. I think I'm showing it to you. Let's see, where's the link? Oh, shoot. I want the link. No, I don't want about. Here we go. You can see it looks exactly the same. Same cover, everything. And you'll see once you get a little bit familiar with what's in this publication, all of this stuff, it's the same, pretty much the content. How do I want to put this? The rules are the same, the numbers have changed. Okay, but you see, this is for use in 2023. So paychecks that are being paid in 2023 would use the information in this pamphlet. For us, we want to use 2022. All right. I just kind of want to take, yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, could you show me where you can download the 2022 booklet to your?
Yep. So in under chapter 4.
Okay.
The videos, lectures, resources tab.
Okay.
You can click on that right there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. You are welcome. Okay. So like I said, this you're gonna refer to this quite frequently when you're doing your homework in this chapter. What this publication has, and by the way, the IRS has hundreds of different publications that give you all sorts of great information. If you have a tax question, 93.5% of the time, you can find an answer in one of these publications. There's a publication that will address it. The other 6.5% of the time, you might have to do additional research. But these publications, they're chock full of tax information, right? And this particular publication solely focuses on how to calculate income tax withholding. Now, you'll see we've got several different chapters here. We've got, and I'll go through these. There are two different methods. Let me see if I can put this in on a chart here. It might be helpful for you. Okay, so we have two different methods for calculating income taxes, federal income tax withholding. we have, I'm trying to figure out how I want to put this down. Okay. We've got the pre-2020 and the post, I should say, is it pre, because I think it's 2019 or earlier. Sorry, I'm looking at my thing here. Yeah, 2019. So pre-2020 and post 2019. Okay, so 2019 and earlier, 2020 and later. Can you guys see that? Oops, sorry, let me get the, put it on the big screen. All right. What these dates refer to are W-4 forms. Okay, and we'll get into the W-4 forms as well when we talk about. And if you've been an employee or you've had employees, you know what a W-4 form is. A W-4 form is filled out by employees to tell the employer how much withholding should be based upon their individual tax situation, what that income tax withholding calculation should be. So the information from these W-4s is used then to determine the amount of income tax withholding. But these forms there are two different sets of forms. There are 2019 and earlier forms and 2020 and later forms. You will know based on, let me pull this up here. Let's see, W-4. Again, it's based on, it's not based on the year in which the calculation is being done, like the year in which the employee is being paid. It is based on the form, which form was used. So I'm going to show you here what those two forms look like. Let's see. And you'll see they look different. Get this up here. Okay. This is a 2019 form. Now, so if the year on the W-4 is 2019 or earlier, then we have to do one type of calculation. If the year on the form is 2020 or later, so here's 2020, we have to do a different type of calculation. And you can see the reason is because the form's changed. Now, employees, they are phasing in. I am assuming that this method is going to be phased out completely, hopefully at some point in the near future. But it's still in use. So there are still employees out there who essentially they just haven't filled out a new W-4 form since they filled out their 2019 or earlier W-4 form. And so if they still have on file a 2019 form and it has not been superseded by one of these forms from 2020 or later, then employers have to use the 2019 and earlier method for calculating income tax withholding. You'll see when we get into this, the forms changed. the questions on the forms changed as well. So this form gives employers information about how much to withhold. Well, if the questions on the form have changed between 2019 and 2020, that means our calculation is going to be different as well. But like I said, we still have these 2019 forms in existence, and some employees are still using them. The number of employees using them are decreasing every year. And like I said, hopefully at some point the IRS is just going to say, you've got to use the new. You can't use these old ones anymore. I wish they had said it already, because it's 2023. It seems like we've had enough time with these 2019s. But so for our purposes, 90% of our time is going to be spent using these 2020 and later forms. So like I said, it says for 2020. If you were to fill out one right now, before, you'd fill out one that has 2023 on it. And it would look like this. Looks exactly the same as the 2020 one, 2020 form, but it just has 2023 on it. So in the problems, if you have to pay, you do have to pay attention to what year the form is. Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
Yes. So what if where it says claim dependent? What if they have like 4 dependent? Where do we write that number 4 in? Because I know the 2019 has the number, but for this new one, it doesn't have the number on it.
No, it doesn't. We don't put it anywhere.
Okay.
Nope, that's one of the things that changed. So, but what we're going to do we're going to first talk about the 2020 and later form, because most of our problems, our homework problems, as well as in real life, most of the real life problems are going to involve the newer forms. But the appendix of this chapter does go over how to calculate withholding if an employee has one of those earlier forms. Okay, but I wanted to point that out, because if you see now on this withholding or this publication, we've got different chapters for the different types of forms. So like for this one, and I'm going to explain what this wage bracket method is and this percentage method, but we've got wage bracket method for manual payroll systems with forms W4 from 2020 or later. And then we've got the same thing, but it's for forms 2019 or earlier. Down here, we've also got this percentage method for forms 2019 or 2020 or later, and then for forms of 2019 or earlier. Okay, so there are different, you got to make sure that you've got the right one. So if you've got a 2019 form and you're using the wage bracket method, which like I said, I'm going to explain what that is, but you're using the wage bracket method, and the W2 is from, I'm sorry, the W4 is from 2019, you do not want to click on this and use the tables for this, because you're using the wrong table, and the amounts will be different. The results will be different. So you've got to pick the right form and the right tables and the right method. There, you have to be very careful when you're doing these calculations. It's very easy to pick the wrong table or the wrong method or the wrong year when you're doing this. So I say this just to kind of point out, you got to be very, very, like I said, payroll accounting is detail oriented. So you've got to make sure you've got the right, you're on the right chapter here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this quick. All right, So like I said, we've got this, these are the forms, the W-4 forms, pre-2020, post-2019. So our dividing line is 2019 into 2020. So December 31st, 2019, January 1st, 2020. Like I mentioned, we've also got two different methods for calculating withholding. We've got what's called the wage bracket method. And we've got what's called the percentage method. And we have a pre-2020 wage bracket method. We have a 2020 percentage method. We have a post-2019 wage bracket method, and we have a post-2019 percentage method. So we've got 4 different methods based upon the form that's being used and the method that we have to use. Okay, so the first thing you have to determine is which form. That's number 1. And then you'll determine which method to use. Now, the good news is most of the time, the wage bracket method is used, and it's the easier method of the two. We use the percentage method once income reaches a certain level. So once income is over a certain level, we can no longer use the wage bracket method. We have to use the percentage method. But like I said, this one, the wage bracket method, essentially this is a table. And the percentage method is a calculation. Let's see. It's essentially a calculation, but it's based on a table. We get that information from a table. All right, so we've got kind of these 4 different methods. You can see here in this publication, here they are. So we've got wage bracket method for manual payroll systems with forms W-4, 2020 or later. Wage bracket method, forms W. So wage bracket method 2020 or later, these right here. Wage bracket method tables 2019 or earlier. Percentage method tables 2020 or later, and then 2019 or earlier. Now, there's also, most of these say this is for manual payroll systems. That means you're doing the calculation yourself. You need to be careful in your problems that you are using, if the problem says using the table for manual payroll systems, you have to use the table, the appropriate table for manual payroll systems. Okay, so it'd be one of these 4. If it says for automated payroll systems, you're going to use this one. That's a different, most of them, I think most of your problems have it for manual payroll systems. So the vast majority of your work is going to be using items 2 through 5 here from this publication. Let's see, what else do I want to say about this? So you're going to become very familiar with this particular publication. Let's look real quick at the W-4. So this is the one again from, yeah, Ange, go ahead. Do you have your microphone on? I can't hear you. If you're talking, I can't hear you. There we go.
I have a question for federal income tax, because if you want to calculate federal income tax, you're supposed to use bracket wage or percent on the you're supposed to use it on the 2 on the math you get right now. So my problem is supposed to be for 401k and federal income tax, which wage taxable for federal income tax, because I don't understand if you want to use a wage bracket and percentage.
You don't, yeah, when you're going to use it. So, and so we'll get into that a little bit more detail about when we're going to use it. Right now, I just want to kind of give you an overview of, there are these different methods. So when we're talking about this stuff, you're not confused about all of the different, what the different methods are, but we will get into when we use those different methods.
Oh,
Is that your question? Yeah, we'll cover that, because I know this is kind of over. You've got all these different methods. Well, how do I know when to use what? First off, your problem will tell you, as far as the homework is concerned. Secondly, there are income cutoffs, and you'll see that when I show you these tables and these forms when we get into this publication in a little more detail. Okay, because we're going to dig into this publication. You're going to be using this a lot, and we'll use it in class a lot too. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, so for the purpose of the class, so most of your work is going to be using 2020 and later forms. So, whether you're using the wage bracket or the percentage method, it's probably equal. But for most of the class, you're going to be using the newer forms. Okay, so this W-4 that we're looking at right here. And you're going to be using the tables associated with 2020 and later. So mostly, where is it here? So mostly those in chapter 2, so these, and percentage method, so chapter 4. So those are the ones that you're going to be using the most. The appendix to this chapter uses the item 3, the brackets and tables in item 3 and 5. Okay, so you got to, and let me see if I can find a problem where I can show you specifically what I'm talking about here. Let me see if I've got one of your homework problems. Just so I can show you how they word it. So, chapter 4. All right, let me see if I can find one here. Okay, so for example, it will tell you in the instructions here, like right here it says, for this edition, the 2020 federal income tax tables for manual systems with forms W-4 from 2020 or later, or let's see, 2020 or later, with standard withholding and 2022 FICA rates have been used. So they're telling you specifically which one of these would be used. So in this case, and this standard withholding, we'll get into what that means as well. So you would use, for this edition, 2022 manual, 2020 or later. So you're going to use, whoops, manual. These are all manual. 2020 or later. So we're either going to use 2 or 4. Now they haven't told you whether you're going to use wage bracket or percentage, but that's something that I'm going to teach you when you use those items or those different methods. Okay, but the problems, oh shoot, sorry. Where'd we go? Not that one. Did I lose it? Did I X out? I must have X'd out. Okay. Sorry. Which one did I click on? No, it wasn't this one, but this says the same thing. It keeps telling you. So for this edition, 2022 federal income tax tables for manual systems with forms W-4 from 2020 or later, standard withholding, 2022 FICA rates. All right. Click here and it will tell you, some of them will tell you exactly which, and they'll give you a link to the table that you're going to use. So here it said wage bracket method. So you just click on there. Let's see. And there are the tax tables in your book, I guess, that it's clicking to, which are really, really tiny, difficult to read, but they do tell you wage bracket method here. All right, so there's all these different methods. Like I said, for the most part, what we're going to use are the 2020 and later method. We're going to use either the wage bracket or the percentage method. I'm going to teach you how to use both of those methods. And I'm going to teach you when you use those methods. Okay? And did you still have a question? And you got your hand up. All right. So let's start talking a little bit about this stuff. I think I'm going to kind of go backwards here a little bit. I'm going to do some calculations today. All of the background stuff, where's my PowerPoints here? Oh, shoot. Let me pull up the PowerPoints. Some of this background stuff, I'm going to let you look at, or if we've got time, we'll go back to it. But a lot of it is just stuff. If you read the chapter, you're going to get that information. I want to spend more time doing some actual calculations so that you can maybe work on some of the homework. So there's all this background, and it's going to go through, sorry. You know, your book is going to go through what types of payments are subject to federal income tax withholding. We will talk about pre-tax and post-tax types of deductions and what their effect is on income tax withholding. I don't want to get into that yet. We're going to kind of come back to that. Certain payments that are exempt from income tax withholding, there's this whole list. I don't want to spend time going through lists of things. I want to actually do some calculations with you. But like I said, we may go through these later. Let's see. All right. Let's look at the W-4 first off. All right, so this is otherwise known as the Employees Withholding Certificate. Let's see if I can make this. All right, so every employee fills this out when they start work. They also will fill it out when something in their personal tax situation changes. So what I mean by that is they get married, they get divorced, their spouse passes away, they have a child, that is now no longer their dependent. Maybe the child, is too old now. They're 22 years old and out of college. They're no longer their dependent. Something changed in their personal life that meant that they had to change and fill out a new W-4 form because their withholding changed. Now, the federal income tax system in this country is based upon what your personal situation is. It's based upon not only your income, obviously income is a big determinant, how much income tax you pay, but there are other items that are also determinants. So your marital status is a big one, whether you're married or not, how many children you have, and the circumstances of those children. Do they live with you? Do they live with somebody else? Are you providing their support? Is somebody else providing their support? Whether or not you own a house can have an impact on your tax situation. Other types of dependents, maybe not children, but you've got like maybe your grandmother lives with you and you take care of her and she has really low income and you're providing all of her support. Well, she might be considered a dependent of yours. So a lot of it has to do not only with your income, but your personal living situation as well, and your relationships with other people. So it kind of gets a little bit personal. This form, how it's filled out, helps to determine then how much withholding and therefore how much tax you pay based upon all of those different circumstances. Now, your employer has information about your income already, right? They know how much they pay you. So this form, you're not putting any information in about the wages that you're earning at that particular job, but you are entering information about your personal living situation. So it has questions like, what is your filing status? Filing status is related to the very first question on the individual income tax return, which is determining what your filing status is. Now, there are six different filing statuses. Married, and it's all based primarily upon your marital status. So if you are not married and you don't have any dependent children, then you're most likely single. Your filing status would be single. The amount of tax that you owe based on your income is going to be also based upon the fact that you're single. So, and single individuals usually, so if you've got a married individual who makes $100,000 and you've got a single individual who makes $100,000, that single individual is actually going to pay more tax on that $100,000, even though it's the same amount of money. Because of how the tax system is set up, they're going to pay higher taxes. So these withholding certificates are geared toward determining how much total tax that individual is going to be paying based upon their personal situation. Married filing separately means you are married, but you are filing a separate tax return from your spouse. So you are legally married, but you're not going to file a tax return with your spouse. There are a multitude of reasons why people might do that. Generally speaking, that is not an advantageous filing status, you usually have to pay more tax, but people have reasons other than taxes that they may want to have that filing status. Married filing jointly. So this is when you are married and you're going to file your income tax return, claim all of your income and expenses together with your spouse. So it's going to go on one tax return and everything's going to be combined. Qualifying widow or widower is an individual whose spouse died in the last 2 years and they have dependent children. The qualifying widow or widower status is generally going to be the same tax rates and brackets as married filing jointly. Head of household, this is where you have an individual who's not married, but they have a dependent, generally speaking, a dependent child who they are taking care of. This is, as far as tax benefits go, this is usually somewhere between married filing jointly and single. But these are, so the employee has to know what their filing status is. The payroll professional cannot fill this out for the employee. If the employee says, I don't know what my filing status is, can you help me with that? The answer is no, I can't help you. You'll need to consult with a tax preparer. So only somebody who actually prepares their tax return, or they can ask a family member to help them out, or a friend or something like that. The payroll professional can't help with this information. But this is so one of the first things that the employee has to do is say, okay, this is my filing status. Generally, all they would do is look at what their last tax return was and mark the box. And you'll see when we get into doing calculations that this is important information. This is one of the factors that we will use in calculating the amount of withholding. Step 2. Now, employees will only fill out step 2 if it applies to them. So step 2, if they have multiple jobs, so they have more than one job, or if they're married and their spouse works, then they would fill out this step 2. And it says right there, multiple jobs or spouse works. Fill this out. When they're talking about what we're going to use here, there are these methods for other methods for determining withholding. This estimator that is on a website run by the IRS can be used. It's pretty complicated. It's essentially, it's like doing your tax return if you use the estimator. But employees can use that and then just say how much their withholding is going to be if they want to do that. There's also this multiple jobs worksheet that's on page 3 here, right here, that can be filled out by the employee. For our purposes in this class, we are going to be using this third option, C. If there are only 2 jobs total, you may check this box. For the other job, whether it's you have a second job or your spouse has a second job, they would also check this box. This is accurate for jobs with similar pay. Otherwise, more tax than necessary may be withheld. So this means a similar pay. The wife makes $50,000 a year. The husband makes $50,000 a year. That's roughly the same pay. They could just check this box here. You'll see that this is also relevant information when we go to calculate, that we're going to need that. This is the checkbox. When they say checkbox withholding, this is the checkbox they're talking about. If there is if the box is checked, then you're going to use a certain calculation. If it's not checked, you're going to use a different. Well, not the calculation doesn't really change, but the tables that you use will change. Okay, so filing status, checkbox, and I'm going to actually write these down because there are 4 factors that you need to know in order to calculate withholding. Erase this. And again, so these 4 factors are the factors that are used only for 2020 or later forms. Okay, so 4 factors. And later. The first thing is filing status. So you need to know what an individual's filing status is. Hopefully you can all see me. Actually, let me do this, because I don't think that the little camera in the corner doesn't show up on the recordings. So here we go. You need to know the individual's filing status. The second thing we need to know is that checkbox. So essentially, yes, no, was it checked? Yes or no. Okay, all we have to do is look at the W-4 in order to determine that. There are two other factors that we need to know. We need to know taxable wages. And I say taxable here, not just total wages, but we may have some benefits that aren't taxable that we're going to then subtract from our total wages to arrive at our taxable wages. So this is important. Taxable wages are required. And then I lost my train of thought. The fourth item that we need to know, oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. Filing status, checkbox, taxable, oh, frequency of pay. Okay, so biweekly, monthly, that stuff. Okay, these are the four major factors that we need to know in order to calculate withholding. The W-4 here gives us a couple of those factors. Now, you'll see there are some, oh, let me get it back up again here for you. There are some other questions on here that are not related to those factors. So there are items that could also play in. One of them, but this is the checkbox, so that was factor 2 there. Filing status, that's up here at the top. Then we do have some additional steps that may factor into the calculation. If you have any dependents, that's going to be entered here in step 3. And this will factor in, if that is entered, that will factor into our withholding calculation. Step 4, items, if you have other that is not from jobs, so like interest income, dividend income, retirement income, anything else that is going to be taxable to you, and you want to withhold those taxes from this paycheck. So you would enter that here. Also deductions, so if you're going to itemize your deductions, which again, we're not getting into that because that's income tax, but that would be entered here. And then any additional amount that the employee might want withheld. Now, I will tell you, in our problems, we are not going to use this step 4. Okay, there are a couple problems though that do use this step 3, where we have some dependents. Okay, so we'll go through and yeah. So if you have income from an IRA that is taxable to you, and you're not withholding any income tax from those payments, you can choose to include that income here and have that tax withheld from your paycheck. Absolutely, that's a good example, IRA. So that's a retirement fund for those who aren't familiar with that. Right, so the only thing that needs to be filled out, that has to be filled out on this, is page 1. Got to have the name, address, all that. Got to have the filing status. Got to have the checkbox either checked or not checked. If it's not checked, then it's not checked. These steps may or may not be filled out depending upon whether they apply to the employee's situation. Again, any of these questions, any questions on this form, the payroll professional cannot help the employee with filling it out. you've got to refer them to a tax advisor. I mean, you don't have to refer them to a specific tax advisor. You just have to say you need to talk to your tax advisor. But it's just important that you don't, because otherwise you're giving tax advice, and you can't do that. All right, and then it has to be signed by the employee. Doesn't have to be signed by the employer. Just has to have the employer's name, first date of employment, the employer's identification number as well. But you'll see the employee is filling this out under penalty of perjury. I declare this certificate, to the best of my knowledge and belief, is true, correct, and complete. So when they sign this, they are attesting to the information on here. So if they say, oh yeah, I'm married, and they're not, they're single, they can get into trouble for that. Now, the employer, it's not the employer's responsibility to verify the information on here. You don't have to do that. It is up to the employee to provide truthful information. This form doesn't go anywhere. It stays on file with the employer. If the IRS comes in and does an audit, they would expect to see these on file for every employee. Now, oftentimes these are filled out electronically these days. So employers will have them on their website, and maybe they've got check boxes where they have to fill, although they do still have to be signed. So that is one limitation of it. They have to be, the employee has to sign and date it. So if an employee, they get hired and they're single, they would check this box, put their name here, their address, all that stuff. And maybe nothing else is filled out, that's fine. If there was no checkbox there, I don't have 2 jobs, I don't have any dependents, and life is going along just grand, and then I meet somebody special and I get married. Well, now I've got to fill out a new one of these because I'm no longer single. I am now married, and I'm going to file separately or jointly. I'm going to file jointly, so I'm going to click that. So, and let's just say that that spouse has a job where he makes about the same as I do. So now I'm going to check that. And then we're going along just fine. And then we have a kid. Well, now all of a sudden I've got to change this again. And I've got to fill in this section about dependents. So I have 1 child, let's say, and I'm going to fill this part in because it says if your income is 200,000 or less, 400,000 or less if married filing jointly, multiply the number of qualifying children under age 17 by 2,000. Well, if I have a baby and I just have 1, it's going to be 2,000. That goes there and that goes there. So see, I'm having to, I don't make changes to the old one. I've got to fill out an entirely new one, an entirely new W-4 form. You know, time goes by, I have another kid. Okay. Whoops. 4. Now it's 4,000. Now it's going to change that situation. And maybe I've got other income. So now I want to add that to it. To have withholding. These change. So employees don't just fill them out when they get hired and then that's it. When circumstances in their lives change, they have to fill out a new one. And if fill out a new one, they have to fill out one of these 2020 or later forms. They can no longer use, where is it here? This one. The only time that an employee would have, that we would be using one of these forms is if an employee filled one out before 2020 and nothing changed. You know, they were single before, they're single now. The other information that they have on here, and you'll see when we go through this, those 4 factors that I listed, some of them are different on this 2019 form. If none of those other things changed, they didn't have any need to fill out a new W-4. Now, most people now probably have filled out the new 2020 or later W-4. The employers can make the employees fill out a new form. Yes, they are allowed to do that. They could say, hey, we need you to update your W-4. And then if you do that, everybody has to do it and you've got to use the new form. just for ease of use, that's probably a good thing to do, right? Let's see, what else do I want to say? That was the 2023 one. Go. All right, so again, all of the information that's on this withholding certificate is information that's going to be used then to calculate the withholding that is going to take place. Then once we've got this information, and I know I'm over time here, I'm sorry, then we're going to take that information and we're going to apply it to the appropriate method using this publication. Now again, because it's 2020 or later, we're not going to worry about this 2019 or earlier. We're going to use one of these two. Real quick, if you've got time, if you have to leave, I understand. What I want to show you is why we would use one over the other. The wage bracket method, and I'm going to take you through this stuff as well when we come back from spring break. The wage bracket method, like I had mentioned, it's a table, right? So it is, you match the information, those 4 factors, we take those 4 factors and we apply it to the table, and then we determine how much withholding there is. But as with any table, it only goes up so far. So for example, let's see, weekly, and you'll see there are several pages to these. Look right up at the top, you got to make sure you've got the right one. This is for a weekly payroll period. There are where I said, remember I said we have to know the frequency of pay. We've got to know that so that we know which table to use. So say we have a weekly payroll period, and we've got those filing statuses up here at the top. And then it says on one, so we've got 2 columns for each filing status. If it's qualifying widow or widower, you use the married filing jointly. But you can see there are 2 columns for each filing status. One is standard withholding, one is checkbox withholding. If the box is checked, you use the column at the right. If the box isn't checked, you use the column at the left. Simple as that. So if we're looking here, we have an individual who's got a weekly pay period, or a week, yeah, they're on a weekly pay. We're looking at over here to the left are the income. This is the taxable income. And this amount up here is calculated here. Okay, so, and we'll go through that, but just know that that comes from this form up here. And this does take you through all the steps. If you actually read it line for line, it will take you through all the steps on calculating that. And there's a range here. So if it at least this 265 to 275, and the individual checked the box and they're married filing jointly, we would withhold $2 from their paycheck. We know their weekly, we know their filing status, we know their taxable income, and we know their frequency of pay. Or I'm sorry, we already had that. We know their wages. Wages are over here to the left. So we've got a range of wages. So let's say they made $270 a week and they were married and they had the check boxes checked. We're going to withhold $2 from their paycheck. So this is the wage bracket method. You'll see, so here's weekly still. Now we get into biweekly. Wait a minute, we stop. We stop at $19.25. Well, what if they make $2,000 a week? Our table has run out. If the table has run out, then we have to use the other method, the percentage method, which I'm not going to go into that now. It's again, I do go into it in those videos if you want to get a head start on it. One other thing I want to point out to you, you see these ranges, 1865 to 1875, and then we go to 1875 to 1885. Well, wait a minute. If they're if their salary is $1,875 exactly? What if they're taxable? Do I use this line, this row, or do I use this row? You're always going to use the second row. So if it's exactly the amount that's on the line, you're going to go one row up, one row, I guess it's one row down. You're going to use the higher withholding amount. Okay, and you can see why it says if the amount here is at least this amount, but less than this amount. So if we've got 1425 is our income, 1425 is not less than 1425, right? But it is at least 1425. So, but just an easy way to remember it, you use the next one down, the higher amount of withholding. So that's weekly. Here we've got biweekly. Then guess what? We've got semi-monthly tables. We've got monthly tables as well. I don't know if we have any daily. There's daily. Wouldn't that be fun? So these tables, you have to make sure when you're doing this, if you're using the wage bracket method, you have to make sure you've got the right table. So you've got to make sure that it's the right frequency. So that's why we've got to have, let me pull this back up again real quick. Sorry, I know I'm going way over here. That's why we need to have these 4 pieces of information. First off, to get the right table. So we need to know the frequency is in order to determine the correct table we're going to use. The taxable wages is to determine which row we're going to use. So I'll write this down. So frequency is for the table, to determine the table. Taxable wages determines the row that we're using. Filing status and checkbox both determine the column. That we're using. Okay, those are the 4 pieces of information that we need. Sorry, I went over. Questions? All right, I know it's a lot of information. I would love it if over spring break you read the textbook. Like I said, feel free to, you can rewatch this video. Feel free to watch those other videos as well to kind of get an idea of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to do a lot of practice. Did we get credit for that San Ruiz question? I'll go back and do that. Now that I think everybody, I had to wait till everybody turned it in order to do that. So I can't give the credit until the stuff is turned in. So I'll go back and do that. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? You bet. No? All right. Well, hey, still snowing here. Be careful if you have to go out driving. Have a great spring break too. Hopefully you can get some rest. And we will see you back here on March 21st. First day of spring. Yay. All right. We'll see you guys later. Thank you for being flexible. Bye.